The warning signs were never loud. They were quiet, small, almost easy to ignore. By the time he realized what they meant, the damage had already settled into places that no apology could reach. Daniel Harper was the kind of man people trusted without thinking twice. At 42, he lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. He worked as a project coordinator for a construction firm, a job that demanded long hours, attention to detail, and constant communication. He liked structure. Predictability made him feel safe. Every morning, he woke up at 6 a.m., brewed black coffee, and checked his emails before sunrise painted the kitchen walls with a soft orange glow. His wife, Laura, used to sit across from him during those mornings. She would sip tea while scrolling through her phone, occasionally looking up to ask him small questions about his day. But over time, those mornings changed. Laura had started waking up later. Their conversations became shorter. Daniel noticed it, but he quietly convinced himself it was normal. Marriage, he believed, naturally shifted with time. Laura worked as a school counselor. She was known for helping students navigate emotional challenges. Ironically, she had always been the emotional center of their marriage too. She listened carefully, remembered birthdays, and encouraged Daniel whenever he doubted himself. But over the past year, Laura had started saying one sentence repeatedly. "Daniel, we need to talk sometime." The first time she said it, he smiled and nodded. He was rushing out the door and promised they would talk later. Later never came. The second time she said it, he was distracted by a deadline at work. He kissed her forehead and said, "Not tonight, I'm exhausted." The third time she said it, her tone carried something different. A quiet hesitation, a softness that felt heavier than anger. Daniel heard it, but chose to ignore it. He told himself Laura was strong. She handled emotional conversations with teenagers every day. Surely she could manage whatever she wanted to say without urgency. Ignoring emotional signals became a habit he didn't even notice forming. At work, Daniel had recently been offered an opportunity to lead a major renovation project. It was a career milestone. The project promised recognition, financial growth, and potential promotion. But it also meant longer hours, weekend meetings, and constant travel between project sites. Laura congratulated him sincerely when he shared the news. She hugged him tightly, but Daniel didn't notice how long she held that hug, or how her smile faded slightly when he started discussing schedules instead of celebration. Over the next few months, Daniel's life revolved around work success and personal achievement. He convinced himself he was building a better future for both of them. Meanwhile, small changes continued to appear. Laura stopped asking about his day. She stopped sitting beside him during dinner, choosing instead to eat quietly while watching television. She stopped saying, "We need to talk." And strangely, Daniel felt relief when she stopped saying it. Silence felt easier than emotional confrontation. One Tuesday afternoon, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. A sudden storm had shut down work at the construction site. He walked into the house expecting to surprise Laura with dinner plans. Instead, he noticed something unusual. The house was quiet, but not peacefully quiet. It felt empty in a way that felt unfamiliar. On the kitchen counter sat a neatly folded envelope with his name written in Laura's handwriting. His chest tightened slightly as he picked it up. Inside was a short letter. Laura explained that she had moved into a temporary apartment near her workplace. She reassured him she wasn't leaving permanently, but she needed space to understand her feelings and their relationship. She wrote that she had tried to talk many times. She wrote that she felt invisible in her own marriage. She wrote that silence had slowly replaced connection. She ended the letter with one sentence that Daniel reread several times. "I stopped warning you because I felt like I was talking to a closed door." Daniel sat down at the kitchen table, holding the letter as if it weighed more than paper should. He replayed every moment Laura had tried to talk, Every time he had chosen work, fatigue, or distraction instead. His mind searched desperately for justification. He was working hard for their future. He was being responsible. He was providing stability. But deep down, another thought quietly surfaced. He had confused presence with partnership. He was physically there, but emotionally absent. That evening, Daniel called Laura. His voice was calm, but strained. He asked where she was, asked if she was safe, asked if she wanted to come home. Laura spoke gently. There was no anger in her tone, which somehow felt worse. She explained that she needed time to understand whether they could rebuild their emotional connection or if they had already grown too far apart. Daniel promised change immediately. He promised to work fewer hours, promised to listen more, promised to prioritize their relationship. Laura didn't argue or reject his promises. She simply said, "I needed those promises months ago, Daniel. Now I need to see if they're real or just fear talking." The call ended politely, but Daniel sat alone in the kitchen long after, realizing that the turning point in his marriage had not been Laura leaving. The turning point had been every ignored warning before that moment. The following weeks introduced Daniel to a type of emotional discomfort he had never experienced before. The house felt larger and colder. Routine tasks felt heavier. Without Laura's presence, Daniel became painfully aware of how many emotional responsibilities she had quietly carried. He noticed unopened mail she used to organize. He forgot grocery items she used to remember. He realized how rarely he had asked about her daily struggles or achievements. Daniel began attending individual therapy sessions after a recommendation from a coworker. Initially, he approached therapy the same way he approached work problems, searching for solutions, strategies, and fast results. But therapy forced him into something unfamiliar: self-reflection. During one session, his therapist asked him a simple question. "When Laura asked to talk, what did you feel?" Daniel paused longer than expected before answering. "Pressure, I think, and fear that I would fail at the conversation." That realization surprised him. Daniel had always believed ignoring emotional conversations made him calm and rational. But he slowly understood that avoidance often hides fear. Fear of conflict, fear of vulnerability, fear of discovering uncomfortable truths. As weeks passed, Daniel wrote letters to Laura, not demanding reconciliation, but sharing honest reflections about his emotional patterns and mistakes. Laura occasionally responded. Her responses were thoughtful but cautious. She acknowledged his efforts but maintained her need for distance. Daniel's work performance also began to shift. The promotion he had chased suddenly felt less meaningful. He still performed well, but he stopped volunteering for overtime. He began declining weekend projects. For the first time in years, Daniel started noticing moments outside productivity. Sunsets he used to ignore during long drives home. Silence that now felt reflective instead of convenient. Months later, Laura agreed to meet him at a small coffee shop they used to visit early in their marriage. Their conversation was calm, respectful, honest. Laura admitted she had felt emotionally alone for years, not months. She explained that her repeated warnings were attempts to reconnect before emotional distance became permanent. Daniel listened without interruption, without defense, without justification. It was the longest emotional conversation he had ever allowed himself to experience. But emotional healing does not follow simple timelines. Laura eventually decided they needed to separate permanently, not out of anger or resentment, but because the emotional disconnect had changed how she felt about the relationship. Daniel accepted her decision quietly, not because it didn't hurt, but because he finally understood that some warnings exist to protect relationships before they break, not to repair them afterward. Daniel's experience reveals a psychological truth many people overlook. Warning signs in relationships are rarely dramatic. They often appear as repeated small requests for attention, communication, or emotional presence. Ignoring these signals can create silent pain that grows unnoticed until it becomes irreversible. Emotional avoidance often disguises itself as patience, calmness, or focus on responsibilities, but decision-making based purely on comfort can slowly damage meaningful connections. Daniel learned that listening is not simply hearing words. Listening requires emotional availability, vulnerability, and willingness to pause personal priorities. He also learned that timing matters in relationships. Promises offered after emotional damage has settled may feel sincere, but they cannot always erase long-term neglect. Self-reflection, he discovered, is not about guilt or blame. It is about recognizing behavioral patterns before they shape permanent consequences. Most importantly, Daniel realized that emotional warnings are not complaints. They are invitations to strengthen connection before silence replaces communication. How many important warnings in our lives appear quietly, disguised as simple conversations we postpone? And when someone asks us to listen, are we truly hearing them or just waiting for the moment to end?